Hey guys, Mr. Ring going over the Math 5, quiz number 8, chapter 2.1, section 1, January 16, 2020. Basically about factoring. Multiple choice, circle the best answer. Question number 1, 7x minus 7. Here you just need to look for the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is 7. If you take a look at this student here, they try to add a b value, but you don't need to do that. This student did, I hope they can see that if you just, when you factor out the GCF, then you can just distribute 7 times x is 7x, 7 times 1 gives you a 7 to double check your answer. Question number 2, x squared plus 7x minus 18. This is a perfect square trinomial. This tells you to use your Xbox factoring. How do you know that? When you have a trinomial 1, 2, 3, and then half of the exponent of 2 equals 1, then you can do this. Zoom in. A times C is negative 18. Your B value goes here, which is your 7. Notice how those are numbers only. You need to think of the product, two numbers that will multiply to be negative 18, and then their sum is 7. Those two numbers are 9 and negative 2. 9 times negative 2 is negative 18, and then 9 plus negative 2, or 9 minus 2, is 7. So because your a value is equal to 1, then you can just take this numbers, positive 9, negative 2. Your answer is B. Take a look at this student. Filled out, look at, they already knew A, B, and C. They filled out their X, but then didn't realize their C value is actually negative 18. This student did X, and then they put it into the box, which is totally fine. Put in a 9x, negative 2x. First term always goes in the top left, last term always goes in the bottom right, and then you take the greatest common factor, x. Greatest common factor, x. Greatest common factor, 9. Greatest common factor, negative 2. And you can multiply and double check your answer. X times x is x squared, negative 2 times x is negative 2x, x times 9 is 9x, 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. And then you take x minus 2, and then x plus 9 right there. That one looks very good. Question number 3. Factor completely. 3x cubed plus 3x squared plus x plus 1. You should recognize from your formula sheet that you have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if you have 4 terms there, then you just put it inside your box. So we did like a z. Now if you do the z, you'll type in, or write 3x cubed, 3x squared, x, and positive 1. And then right there, you're just taking out, you put it inside and you're trying to figure out numbers on the outside. So the greatest common factor here is a 3x squared. The greatest common factor this direction is just an x. The greatest common factor here, you think like, oh, they don't have anything in common. Remember, they have always a 1 in common. Same way this direction. So 3x squared plus 1 and x plus 1 is your answer there. And this student got the correct answer, showed the work. Take a look at this student. This student did the GCF twice. They took the greatest common factor of this one, which is x plus 1. Same thing over here. The greatest common factors of 1, and then the x plus 1 you take out, and then you just have 3x squared plus 1. Good job. All right, this student, what did they do? Greatest common factor, that one works. That looked like a heart. It's meant to be a check. Greatest common factor, yes. 1, yes. And then right here, this is not the greatest common factor. That's the mistake. Because think about it. Remember, to check your answer is just x times x gives you x squared, not x. So this would have to be a 1. 1 times x gives you x. Question number 4, multiple choice, x to the 4th minus 8x squared plus 16. There is no greatest common factor here. You have a trinomial, 1, 2, 3, and then half of 4 is 2. That means you can use your x in your box. A is your 1, C is 16. A times C is 16. My B value is -8. The two numbers that multiply to be positive 16 are -4 and -4. And then if you add those together, you get -8. You're going to take these two here. You're going to take those two right here, and those will always go into the bottom left and the top right. Your first term here, do I get to choose the color? I guess not. That is x to the 4th. Your first value always goes in the top left there, and then the 16 always goes into the bottom right there. And then you take the greatest common factor, x squared. Okay, this is a little tricky, -4, and this one is -4. Remember, multiply to check your answer. X to the 4th, -4x squared, -4x squared, positive 16. X to the 4th minus 8x squared plus 16 if you combine like terms. So you have x squared minus 4, x squared minus 4, and then don't forget you have to have a b value that is 0. So a times c is -4, b value is 0. Your numbers are -2 and 2. So that goes right there and there. And so you have two of those, 1, 2. That's x plus 2 squared, and then x minus 2, there's 1, 2. So that's x minus 2. That is your answer. All right, so this student tried chunking, and it says method chunking, but I didn't understand it. If you chose the chunking method, your box would have been x squared. This student did something interesting. They added 0x. I think because they think that it was missing a b term there. Let's see what they get. And then they tried factoring by grouping, because they have 4 terms and they put it into the box, x squared. And then -8, no, it wouldn't work. X squared, no, it wouldn't work. All right, this student didn't get a response. They got x squared minus 4 here, and I think they were trying to see if there's a GCF. There wasn't. This student missed the b is a 0. They had it as 0x. So this was going in the right direction. This one looked good. All right, this student did the x method, and then all that was correct. And then right here, x times x cubed is x to the 4th, but x cubed times -4 is not -4x cubed. All right, so now we have question number 5 on the backside. For your response, make sure to show all your work and box your answers. I had a lot of students not boxing their answers. Question number 5, you have a trinomial here, and you're saying, what's half of 5? It is 2.5, and that's not 2.5. So what does that mean? Well, the first thing you should always be looking for is the greatest common factor. Here I wrote out the factors. 6x to the 5th is 6, 3 x's, and 2 x's. -24x to the 4th is -4 times 6 times x to the 3rd times x, because that would be x to the 4th. And then 18 is 6 times 3 times x cubed. And what do they all have in common? They all have a 6x to the power 3. So let's see if I can highlight that. This here, they all have this one. So this is what that's my greatest common factor right there. And then anything that is not circled, x squared minus 4 and positive 3 is what's left. And then from here, I can just use my Xbox method. A times C is positive 3, B value is -4. My two numbers are -1 and -3. And then this is our answer right there. I want to go down here. If you got some kind of common factor, I think I gave you 2. And then if you got this 6x to the 3rd but couldn't do that one, I gave you at least a 3. Let's take a look at some student work. This student got it. Looks good, looks good. Good job. Another student got the correct answer, showed their x. Good job. All right, this student found the GCF. And look here, they found the common factor, and then they probably took out another 6 there. Here, they got stuck. they thought it was prime, and they didn't think of there was numbers. So you can keep going. All right, this student tried factoring by grouping, but there's only 3 terms because they tried to fit all 3 of these into the box, and then they put a 0 there. But originally you only have 3 trinomials, so not 4, so don't use factoring by grouping. Okay, this one looks really nice. They've put out all the factors there to show you where they got the GCF, and then in this trinomial they use your x in your box. This one looks really nice. All right, this student tried to do the x box, but recognized they were doing the hard work, right? I could tell the student to have a calculator here, get a calculator. And then they filled it in here, right? But remember, this is a trinomial. That's the first condition. The second condition is what's half of 5? It is not 4, so you cannot use the x box method. All right, question number 6 tells you 3 things: factor, identify the zeros, and sketch. So you have 4 terms here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this should automatically tell you factoring by grouping. I'm going to put this in the box. There is my z. Draw z right there. So 2x cubed, negative 3x squared, negative 32x, and then positive 48. Then what I'm going to do is just figure out my GCF here. You can't, it got cut off there. That is an x squared. This direction is a 2x, and this direction is a negative 3. And that negative 3 right there kind of gives me that hint. And then the GCF going this way is 16. Remember, multiply to check your answers. X squared times 2x gives me 2x cubed. X squared times negative 3, negative 3x squared. 2x times 16 gives me negative 32x. Negative 3 times 16 is, that's a negative 16. Got cut off, is a positive 48. So my answer is 2x minus 3 and then x squared minus 16. Then from there, recognize that you have a 0x right here. And then when you factor that, that's going to give you x plus 0x minus 16. And that's a difference of squares. So when you do your x, you'll get x plus 4, x minus 4. Set those equal, so that's my factored answer. And then if you set those both equal to 0, you'll get x equals 3 halves, negative 4 and 4. This is identifying the zeros. And then to make a sketch, I put 3 halves, positive 4, negative 4, and the 48 is your C value, or your constant. And then the highest degree is a odd degree right here. Start down, end up. So 2 points if you just filled out the box correctly, that you just put in that z and you couldn't figure those out. I said you got 3 points if you got 1 correct, 1 of the 3, factor, identify, zeros, or sketch. So if you can get 2x minus 3, x plus 4, x minus 4, I give you, that's factoring, I give you 3 points. 3.5 points if you get 2 correct, meaning like all the zeros or the graph. And then if you made a mistake, 3.75. Let's look at some work. All right, I wanted to show you this one. Student got put into the box. They factored it. Okay, here, which is perfectly fine, they set them equal to 0. Looks good, divided by, yes, this is correct. Okay, right here, pay attention. This was common mistake number 1. X squared minus 16. They added 16 to both sides. They took the square root. Pay attention. X equals 4. They're saying if you take 4 and you square it, the only answer equals 16. The only answer you can put in for x is 4. And this is wrong because the answer is also negative 4. Because negative 4 times negative 4 equals 16. And this should have given a hint, right? If they only had 2 zeros, right? Think about this. They only had 2 dots. But think about it. This is essentially a multiplicity of 2, right? Because you need a total of a degree 3. So this was common mistake number 1. What else mistakes? I wrote them down. Or another common mistake is, let's see if we can find, I'm not sure if we can find the student work. X squared minus 16 is not x plus 8, x minus 8. Wrong. Put a 0x and then do your x box. And then another common mistake was x squared times x. People were 2x cubed. Remember, multiply outside your box to get inside the box to check your answer. Let's look at some more work. All right, take a look at this one. Filled out the box correctly. 2x minus 3, x squared minus 16, totally correct. And then right here, same thing. They didn't set it equal to 0. Although this is correct, 1.5, they missed one right here, 4. And then they knew it was cubic. They should have recognized that they were missing something right over there. Okay, here was a classic example of a mistake right here. Student filled inside the box correctly. There's your 2 points. But then right here, they took out the greatest common factor, and they said the greatest common factor was only x squared, which is correct. This is correct. But right here, the greatest common factor is not just 1x. They do have an x, yes, but they're both even, so it should have been a 2 here. And to double check that, x squared times x is only x cubed, not 2x cubed. Here's that other classic mistake I said about. They put a b of 0x. Good. Right here, they should have just put in the x. Why is this wrong? Because if you did full over the box, then you would get x squared, 8x, 8x, and then 64. So if you multiply this out, you would get x squared plus 16x plus 64, not this. All right, question number 7. Solve x squared plus x plus 1. Okay, if you did the x method to factor to solve, you would get a times c is 1, b value is 1, and then there's two numbers to multiply. So therefore, this is prime. What does prime mean? Prime means that you cannot factor it. Okay, so if you can't factor it, what always works? The quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over a very long division sign over 2a. You did my substitutions here in parentheses. You have a negative sign, and my b value is 1 plus or minus, and then my b value was 1. B squared, 1 squared, negative 4. Your a value is in front of x squared, so that's 1, and then your c value is 1. Big fraction line all over 2 times a. A value is 1. And then you simplify this. 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Opposite of positive 1 is negative 1. And then 1 minus 4 is negative 3. The factors of the square root of negative 3 is square root of negative 1 times square root of 3. The square root of negative 1 is I. There are no two identical numbers that multiply to equal 3. Therefore, it stays. So 2 acceptable answers, negative 1 plus or minus I radical 3 over 2, or if you separate it, you would get negative 1/2 plus or minus, and then I radical 3 over 2. So if you wrote just prime, I gave you 2 points. If you used the quadratic formula, I gave you 3. If you were super close, I gave you 3.5, 3.5, 3.75 based off of your answer. Let's take a look at some student work. All right, this student didn't have an eraser. It was like, come on. And they just wrote that. So they got 1 point because you can't, 1 plus 1 is not 1. So they scratched out prime. I would have given them 2 points if they did prime. I'm showing this one, no attempt on the problem, then I give you a blank, which is a 0. All right, let's look at this student. Okay, new is prime, that was good. Quadratic formula, looks good right here. Okay, then they stopped. Remember, what do pirates say? Pirates say I is square root of negative 1. So student didn't know that. All right, take a look at this student. Recognize those prime, went to the quadratic formula, wrote the quadratic formula down, and I don't know if you can spot the mistake right there. It should be negative b. So that should have been negative 1. So I probably gave him a 3.75. But student recognized square root of negative 1 is I. That was really good. All right, this student recognized those prime, wrote the quadratic formula correctly. Happy. Substitutions. Looks good. Okay, look here. You had a fraction, and then they eliminated the fraction. It should be over 2. And then here, you don't need a square root, so it's negative 1 plus or minus. You don't put a square root there. And last problem, number 8, factor completely. So trinomial 1, 2, 3. You should recognize half of 2 is 1. So you can use your Xbox. Long, it's difficult, but you can do it. Let's do it. Not too much. A times C is negative 99. B value is 30. I wrote out some factors here, and I realized, okay, this gives me a good visual. I need two numbers that multiply to be negative 99, but add to be 30. And so right here, you should recognize that, well, if I make one of those negative, if I make the 3 negative, those will add to be 30, and they multiply to be negative 99. Okay, because the A value is greater than 1, you must do the box. First term goes in the top left. The constant, the C value always goes to the bottom right, and then these two numbers here are splitting the middle term, so you add an x. So this would be 33x, and this one is going to be negative 3x. Greatest common factor, 3x, negative 1, and positive 11, 3x plus 11, 3x minus 1. This was your correct answer. Remember, the order does not matter. You can have 3x plus 11 and 3x minus 1. Some of you recognize that this was kind of big and hard, but if you looked at the first two terms, you can do it by chunking. And if you did it by chunking, it should look like this. Remember, your parentheses, your first two terms, your greatest common factor is 3x. And so my substitution is the box equals 3x. So what I put in the parentheses has to be exactly the same. The power of 2 is on the outside, so 3x times 3x gives us 9x squared, and 3x times 10 gives you 90x. The point of chunking method that I'm showing right here, what it does is it goes from an A value that was 9 to an A value that is now 1. So if my box equals 3x, I get box squared plus 10 box minus 11. A is 1, C is negative 11. My B value there is 10. Two numbers that multiply to be negative 11 are 11 and negative 1. And those two numbers add together to be 10. So I have 11 and negative 1. And the great thing is I don't have to use a box because your A value is equal to 1. And then you substitute your box back in for 3x. And then you get the same answer as above. All right, this student did it by X box method and did it correctly. There's the X and there's the box. Another student, X box method, good job. All right, this student didn't read it correctly. They must have said solve. Remember, solve and factor are different things, but they chose to use quadratic formula to solve. That's not what I was looking for. Now, it is possible if you did solve for x, then put it back into x minus those parentheses, then you could have done it, but I'm not sure that student knew that based on the information they did here, because maybe they would have led me to that by having parentheses x minus. Oh man, this problem's screaming, get a calculator. Oh, this is a nice one. Chunking, good job. Most students who don't know what the answer is, they write prime incorrect. It's a 1 point. I think on this problem you had to, what did I write? If you got the x correct, I gave you 2 points. And then if you did the x in the box, then you get 3.5, 3.75. So even if you just filled out this part, I would have given you 2 points, even though that's not all of it. All right, this student got a messy. Get an eraser. They got stuck on, on the x, so they did the chunking method, and they did that correctly. But they didn't know what to do after that. They didn't know what to do from here, nor do the substitution again. So I gave them a 1. I just had to show you guys. Triangles! Awesome. The student did chunking method, and then they kind of left. They forgot what happened to the box. What is the box? And just had x. So you have to do a substitution back in. And last student example, they did the x. Whoa. Negative 9 b value. Not correct. But I wanted to show you the student was missing the box. That's what I wanted to show you. All right, so the back side was 16. Let's see. Front side Multiple choice, 4 questions times 2 is 8 points. Name in period 2. Give you the pre-score, they write it up there. Okay, a lot of students are not boxing their answers on the back side of the free response. Got a -1. Messy, a lot of students lost a point. I'm going to guess, let's see if I can put in my calculator. 2 divided by 26 gives you 7.5%. So just boxing your answers is 3.5% of your grade, so you wouldn't lose it. And also messy. A lot of students didn't want to use their eraser, they're using pen. You've been in my class for a semester, so hopefully these corrections were helpful for you. Good luck.
Math.
Say it again.
Our math.